Welcome back to another edition of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. My guest today is former Member of Parliament and currently the President of Canadians for Affordable Energy, Dan McTeague. We'll be right back with the show. So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. So, Dan, before I begin, you are also, of course, known as the gas price wizard. I have to mention that you're the guy who knows the lowest price of gas. Not much places left with low gas prices, though, these days.
No, so it's switched to affordability. That's not working out very well either.
And I was going over your bio, and I knew you were an MP for a long period of time, but I'd forgotten it was 18 years, and I forgot you had 3 different ridings over the years. Kept changing the name, right? But that's, but of course, I remember you fondly from my years on the Hill working there, and I always considered you a principal MP, and of course, with a strong Roman Catholic faith, which I call Justin Trudeau a smorgasbord Catholic because he picks and chooses the doctrine he doesn't like. And I know you've always been very very principled in your opinions and your policies. So I applaud the work you're doing with Canadians for Affordable Energy. But I wanted to start off with an announcement. Stephen Guilbeault, the Environment and Climate Change Minister, said a couple of weeks ago that all subsidies are going to end to the oil and gas industry. And you were quick to go on Twitter and say, there are no subsidies. Why is Guilbeault lying about this?
Well, look, I don't know much about the character except from his own past. I remember reading about him during the 1995 referendum, which we almost lost, and his advocacy for separation of the country, for withdrawal from NAFTA, and some disparaging remarks he had for people who suffered as a result of the Walkerton mishap, when a significant amount of E. coli wound up in the system. And then I further fast forward to his, jumping on towers and unfurling banners on the homes of former premiers. All of these things I think are well known. What is not well known is that the fanaticism with which he carries out his job as a minister is boundless. And his commentaries, I think, are certainly worthy of rebuke and to resist pretty much everything that man says, because much of what he's doing is classified as alarmism and deconstruction of the country in the worst sense of the word. I hope that what we will see, though, with the tumbling numbers of the Trudeau Liberals, of course, I was an 18-year member of the Liberal Party when it was the Liberal Party, and served the other previous leaders of the party going back as far as 1978. So I'm not new to what this party is, what it represents. It's always been more or less trying to stay at the center, trying to bring people together rather than finding ways in which to divide them. So Guilbeault's comments, as someone who's new to the Liberal Party and obviously an avowed separatist, a socialist, and I would say a Marxist, is not a surprise. The response by those out there, or silence to what he's saying, though, is rather appalling, not just for the media, but for those of us in the Liberal Party, the true Liberal Party, who ought to know better.
Well, yeah, certainly he's either misinformed or he is deliberately falsifying the information and demonizing, of course, the oil and gas industry. It seems to be just so characteristic of this Trudeau government. I'm going to call it the Trudeau government because, yeah, I know you served 18 years as a Liberal, and I don't think Trudeau really is a Liberal in any sense of the word. He is so extreme, he's so polarizing, and he is just so arrogant. It makes his father look like a humble man, but he is just constantly obsessed with climate change and with increasing the price of gasoline and oil and everything Canadians need just to live. But you know what amazes me is that Justin Trudeau and a lot of the mainstream media insist that all of these wildfires that are raging across Canada are the direct result of climate change. They say that without any real tangible evidence. But what strikes me is that we have a carbon tax in this country that's supposed to be stopping climate change. And yet apparently it's not working because we've never had more wildfires. And amazingly, they all end at the U.S. border. So I mean, how can they have it both ways? That the carbon tax is somehow attacking, fighting climate change, and yet we seem to have forest fires everywhere that they say are a direct result of climate change.
Well, they're the result of people with matches and propane tanks and other ways in which to ignite these fires. Very interesting to see that Danielle Smith made an admission just about 2 weeks ago, where she said of the 600 odd fires in that province in the past year, fully 500 of them were human induced, somehow, perhaps by accident. But in other cases, we do have people, whether it's the Northwest Territories or whether it is in the Okanagan, police are looking for assailants that they know were responsible for setting fires. Now, whether it was the entire fire or whether it's mischief or mishap, those areas are prone. The Okanagan has had, significant fire activity in the past. I remember the one in 2003. I was a privy councillor at the time, concerned about whether or not we could bring in more help to prevent or to mitigate the fire that took place then. And 10 years before that, in 1993, same thing, same place, same location. Look, we have to be very careful about how we approach these things. As we're seeing now in Maui, the governor has finally had to admit that his earlier comments that this is about climate change were false and had everything to do with mismanagement by his own government, the governor himself. Mm-hmm. We also know that vegetation in that region is 80%. Non-indigenous. It's not part of that. It's not native vegetation that's used. So you can go through all of these things, but to quickly come to the conclusion about its climate, you have to know that the people that are doing this have an angle. They have a game plan. They have a narrative. And it's not just about altruism, saying, hey, I'm worried about the next generation. I'm worried about the climate burning up. That's fine. You can have those delusions. But when it's about grifting, about getting money from the federal government so you can continue to perpetuate these myths, it's amazing. Guilbeault does his little statement the other day about attacking and saying we're going to have clean electrical grid. Impossible to do, by the way, in many parts of the country. But here he is saying these things. And at the same time, the people applauding him from behind, getting money from the federal government, the Canadian Climate Institute, and Rick Smith in particular. I dueled with them a little bit on Twitter. I find it frankly appalling, and that the people have the temerity and the gall to go out and say, oh, yeah, it's great what the government's doing. We think more should be done. We should harm the country and we should get rid of all these things. We're collecting $20 million from taxpayers. I hope that with the new government, whenever that should take place, and I know it will take place, the first thing they do, restore the audits on these charities, because they're foundations turning into charities. There's no oversight over their conduct or their activity. It's not charity at all. And second of all, cut the umbilical cord. Do what Jean Chrétien did in 1997 with a lot of these, these wacky groups out there that said, we represent these people, therefore you should give us money. He said, well, if you think it's that important and the public thinks you're that important, go fund yourself. And by the way, he did say that. I'm sorry, that's my dog in the background. About the National Action Committee on the Status of Women. Never forget Chrétien saying to our caucus members, go fund yourself. And it worked.
So you would agree then that this net zero electricity policy is outrageous for provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta that don't have hydroelectric access?
Not only outrageous, I think it's insane. And there's no way of describing it any other way. What you have here are policies being driven by people who know full well that it is impossible to make those changes, not with the current menu of technologies available today. Now, unless someone has a magic wand, and has some kind of new technology that they think they can bring forth, these things can't happen in the time frame that trendy folks like Stephen Guilbeault wants. Frankly, Mr. Guilbeault has only as much power as Justin Trudeau has, and Justin Trudeau has only as much power as Jagmeet Singh is prepared to give him, and stupid voters in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver won't tolerate this. At the end of the day, this isn't about Saskatchewan, this isn't about Nova Scotia, this isn't about Alberta, this is about Canadians being able to make ends meet. And guess what? The number one issue in this country is not, socks, sobbing, and selfies. The issue in this country is not about weather and how it changes, because we are one of the most coldest countries in the world. It is about affordability. If you want to talk about the main issue, it's energy prices leading to much higher costs for everything. which in turn has the Bank of Canada saying, let's raise those interest rates. So anybody who thinks this is cool and trendy, look at your bank account. When you sit down at the table trying to figure out how you're going to make ends meet because you have a month at the end of pay rather than pay at the end of the month, well, then you have no one to blame but yourselves. And I say that to the people here in Toronto. This is not a message for the West. This is a message for Torontonians, the GTA, Hamilton, and those regions that have, typically thought, hey, I love the socks. I love the sobbing. I love the hair. Well, that is not going to help you now, is it? Because affordability has now been significantly eroded. The country is in a very, very tight situation, and it's not going to get any better until we have a change in policy. And we need to show people like Stéphane Guilbeault and his colleagues the door.
Well, I'm hoping this is almost like a fad that is going to be disappearing within the next 5 to 10 years. Because if we go through with this plan of net zero by 2035 or even 2050, I think we're going to see a lot of Canadians suffering. But I have a clip here, actually a couple clips, and I thought you'd enjoy this. This is from a U.S. perspective, but I think the Biden administration is running exactly on the same level as the Trudeau administration, and I find this Fox Business News host quite interesting.
Folks, maybe this will slow them down, because I think it's going to be the greatest economic boondoggle in American history. Yep. Solyndra, all the other stuff, a proverbial drop in the bucket. Right now, EV sales are being lifted by these massive subsidies, but there are so many of them being built. They're piling up. In fact, supply is up 350%. And some just aren't selling. The Genesis, they've got one that sold 18 electric whips. 18! Even Tesla, their whole market share, but they've been slashing prices like crazy. Now, the only way to meet the outrageous targets that they want is to make it a pain in the gas to drive an internal combustion engine car. The administration has such plans on the board, folks. The EPA is going to change tailpipe rules. There's all kinds of other gimmicks. It's going to force you to just ditch your gas-powered car. In the end, there's going to be mountains of unsold cars. I don't know what we're going to do to the lithium batteries. We're going to strip mine the entire planet. The economy, the economic toll will be crazy. Again, remember, mark my words, the worst economic boondoggle ever.
Charles Payne, I think is quite good on this. And he raises a number of points. But first of all, he's saying that the regulations are going to become so unbearable and so extreme that we will no longer be able to drive gas-powered cars. Do you see the Trudeau government trying this here?
Well, I look at this from the point of view of someone who's worked in Canada, the United States, in my capacity and energy, and realize Americans are now beginning to get a little bit of a taste of what Canadians have already experienced with not one but two carbon taxes. You're seeing that in Nova Scotia and British Columbia. But in terms of the electric vehicle, and I mean, look, you want to drive one of those, that's fine. Just don't get people who are hard pressed to go pay and subsidize your woke rides. And if you think there's some kind of environmental advantage, it's zero. In fact, it's probably more damaging. And the only people profiting from this are the major automotive companies who've been able to bamboozle into the idea of building batteries here in Ontario or Quebec or wherever the case may be, with massive subsidies. Once the grift ends, once these massive real subsidies, because you start off the question about oil companies and Guilbeault talking about theirs. You take away the oil industry and natural gas industry in this country, and I'm a guy who's taken them on. There's no other MP in history who took them on the way I did, and I still am not their allies, and I'm not their friends, especially when they do the kind of funny stuff they're doing now in appeasement with the green folks that want them gone. When you take away an industry like that, how are you going to pay? Who is going to manage to raise the $25 to $30 billion every year that industry creates so that the government go around and throw out money that they don't have? Worse, the technology is changing. The lithium battery may not be the coal battery that we're looking at in the next 5 to 10 years. My old company that I work for is public relations. Toyota Lexus has now developed a different type of technology using batteries, which are lighter, easier to charge. So everything that we're doing now, we're spending all this money, may be obviated before it even gets started. The reality is that at the end of the day, the people that are really laughing aren't just people from companies outside of Canada, but China, because they always get a pass. Look, I think electric vehicles are great. They're wonderful. If you're driving in the city, I've driven one, but I still think that in this country, what matters to people is range, it's reliability. And people have a very strong sense of saying, if you can equal all the things that an internal combustion engine is doing, by the way, they're extraordinarily clean now. The Biden administration is going to raise the EPA so that the mileage or that the fuel economy becomes such that it is impossible. No engine could possibly do that. So 3-cylinder engines are now doing what 8 cylinders used to do 20 years ago, with a third, a fraction, 1/10 of the emissions. Bottom line is that this is all, as I said before, magic and make-believe. And it's saying you're going to achieve a standard for which technology doesn't exist to address it. What you're really doing is, unless you're ignorant, you're basically saying you want the human condition to be reduced to rubble, and you want people to live in a state of nature, eating acorns, wearing animal skins. And you know what? Americans certainly won't put up with that. Eventually, Canadians will get around to saying maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe it's not such a great idea, especially in Toronto.
Well, what amazes me is Guilbeault, of course, is off to China tomorrow to visit with a Communist Party allied environmental group that he is the executive vice chairman of. He doesn't seem to see any conflict of interest in this. All of the problems we've had with Chinese interference in Canadian elections, and he's blithely going to China, which I'm sure you know produces 33% of the greenhouse gases in the world. And he puts absolutely no pressure on China. Trudeau, of course, admires China as this dictatorship that can turn its economy around on a dime, but they put no pressure on China. Canada produces 1.5% of global greenhouse gases. So even if we're living in caves, we don't have any electricity, we have no power, and we have no gasoline, we're not going to make an impact on this so-called global problem. And it amazes me how any government can be so obsessed with an issue that they are willing to almost go through a cultural revolution in this country without any sort of understanding about basic human needs, because the ideology is just paramount. It's all about ideology.
It's his ideology. It coincides. That's Guilbeault's ideology coincides with Trudeau's. If you look at the track records there, get out of homes and fossil fuels. No more suburbs. Make sure your home is a lot smaller. No more using natural gas to heat your home. But even if that were something we can contend with, the most egregious is what he said back in 2019, 2020 about Guangzhou. What he said about Huawei is that the only reason Huawei is being beaten up is because these Western telecom companies are, feeding the heat on the 5G network. This is a Manchurian candidate. And for people who don't understand the expression, and I'm not talking about the movie, I'm referring to somebody who can be used as a useful idiot by another country to come out and spout these things off. He is a Marxist, and there's no doubt that his comments and his reputation, anybody who's done a bit of research on this man, will come quickly to the conclusion he's the last person you should have in Parliament, much less as a minister. And his jetting off to another country, where I come from, in my generation of Liberals, that would be considered seditious and potentially treasonous. Now, the laws on those are very, very vague and very, very specific in terms of what constitutes that. But he did not disclose these things prior to. And the very mere fact that media is not playing into this and understanding the implications is extraordinarily dangerous. He's not there to convince China that they should use less. If he were willing to do that, he'd be going and saying, hey, we've got a lot of natural gas to offer you, and you can use that as a substitute to coal. Instead, he's going there to get a good pat in the head and try to pretend that he's going to hurt Canada while giving China a pass. This is wrong on a number of fronts. And the mere fact that we have far less any authority looking into this, the mere fact the Privy Council office would allow something like this to happen in the PMO, well, this is on Trudeau. This is the same party that has corrupted our democratic process by permitting the Chinese to manipulate it. And I agree with those out there who say maybe other countries, Iran in particular, because we have a number of people who have received donations and been done very well here in the GTA via money coming from the Iranian regime. That aside, this is a very dangerous precedent. The fact that it's being given a pass is, in my view, appalling. Far more appalling than any issue I see in this country. Where is the public inquiry that has been demanded? Where is the public inquiry to restore the integrity of our institutions? Perhaps you have to be a contributor to the Liberal Party to become a judge in this country. But that aside, this situation with Mr. Guilbeault, I think, spells what is wrong and why our country and its institutions are on a precipice of collapse that will put Canada in a position that no one thought possible 10, 15 years ago. And that's joining the third world in terms of its rank as a banana republic.
Yes. No, it's a very interesting perspective, and it's heartening to hear that. But I got another clip for you here, which might I don't know if you've seen this one or not, but it's worth watching.
And that's why we've invested massively in electric vehicles, in batteries, in the clean fuel standard. The very purpose of that is to allow for transportation with less harm to the environment. I have every confidence that industry is going to respond positively. So I don't have any concern whatsoever, because I have so much faith in the innovators in this country who are being fueled by the investments that we are making. I mean, there are going to be no internal combustion engines in Canada in 2035. There are going to be no internal combustion engines in Canada in 2035.
That a member of Parliament from Prince Edward Island can say there are going to be no internal combustion engines by 2035. Are they serious, or are they mad?
Well, it goes along with the insanity, but the irony for me is in the backdrop of the picture that member of Parliament found himself was the symbol of the United Way. The United Way has to spend thousands of dollars from its funds to pay for people who can't afford to put home heating oil, stove oil, furnace oil to keep themselves warm, or their natural gas or propane across the country. So for him to sort of wax poetically and say we can get rid of these things, and those who are already destitute in the maritime provinces can somehow afford $40,000 to $100,000 cars, is delusion beyond anything that is easily explained. I'm not sure if it's neurosis or a psychological thing with these folks, but he's in the Maritimes, and he knows full well, since he made that interview 2 weeks ago, that the numbers for the Liberal Party are tanking. They're collapsing. They're cratering. And they are, because it's not the Liberal Party that I belong to, where I was responsible for helping people, getting rebates, and find ways to help people manage during difficult times, and holding some of these corporations to task, as well as governments when they try to find cute, trendy ways. No, David, what we're looking at here is virtue signaling. We're looking at some kind of attempt at moral evaluation in which these people have greater morality by saying, we'll drive electric cars, we'll have heat pumps, we'll have wind power, we'll have solar power. It's all nice to have that, but they cannot displace the heft, the bulk, and the need that can only be derived from things like natural gas, nuclear, propane, oil, or coal. Anything short of that, and you will leave people destitute. So one has to think that this is, bordering on neurosis and madness, but it is also a significant reflection of arrogance and stupidity mixed in one. It's a very dangerous combination. Here's a guy with a straight face who ought to know better, who's an elected member of Parliament, saying, there won't be internal combustion engines in 2035. What is he, Krayden? I can tell you there will be a lot of vehicles that his government will be gone, and the next government will have to change that mandate to what is more realistic and pragmatic and acceptable. And, I don't come at this easy. I was, as mentioned earlier, public relations with Toyota Canada. I helped introduce and do the cut lines for the press for the first hybrid that we brought out. It was called the Tsunami. Mm-hmm. You'll know today as the Prius. That technology was guaranteed to last 30 to 50 years. And guess what? It's working out. 30 years on, it's still considered the way to go. To suggest that somehow we can get rid of all these things, the beauty of Canada's energy resources, both internally and its potential externally, is the diversity of energy. We have it all. And to put all our eggs in one basket, well, wait till an ice storm comes through, or a hurricane comes through and knocks down all your windmills or your hydro towers. We'll see how far you get then, because I can tell you, without natural gas and propane as a backup, you're going to leave a lot of people stranded, cold, in the dark, or in extreme heat.
Well, clearly there's a lack of thought, lack of planning going on here that is potentially catastrophic for the country. And I just hope we have enough time to draw back from this awful planning, because this government is putting Canadians in a very difficult situation, and it's just getting worse. Why is the price of gas like this? This is an MP from PEI. Pierre Poilievre did a news conference last week in front of a gas station in PEI. The price was $1.85 a liter. Yeah. And here's an MP wanting, with crazy ideas. Why is the price of gas 20 cents higher in PEI? Is it just because of the transportation costs?
Two carbon taxes. The first, of course, 14.31 plus 15%, of which the federal government takes 5%. So that, by the way, is not rebated. The second carbon tax at this point is about 9 cents a liter. That's the clean fuel regulation, the clean fuel standard. We at Canadians for Affordable Energy put together with a team of individuals, some with political backgrounds like myself, economist Ross McKittrick, and we discovered that the effect of the clean fuel standard would be 6-to-1 negative. In other words, the cost benefit analysis, which the federal government refused to do in the first go around, would hit so hard those that are, that would be impacted, that it would it basically cause several provinces to stall economically and otherwise. They went back to the drawing board, made a few amendments, said natural gas and propane and still diesel for heating, home heating won't be affected. And yet it's affecting gasoline and diesel on which your economy runs. So the beginning of the summer, before all this nonsense, and oil was pretty much trading the same as what it is today, it's $1.50 a liter. Now it's $1.85, heading to $1.90, probably $2 in the next few weeks for a variety of reasons. So that 50 cents, of that 50 cents, fully 23 cents is the result of the two carbon taxes, and those will double, as we know, and triple until 2030. So now you're talking $2.50 a liter, maybe even $3 a liter for diesel. And let's not forget, because every time I do my analysis, I like to show this to people because I do it every day and I've been doing it for 27 years. You want to find out what's going on? The Canadian dollar. The Canadian dollar is no longer trading because the attack of the Liberal government, shutting down pipelines, permitting Biden to do something as stupid as killing the Keystone XL, in which we can get energy to the rest of the world because we have a federal government saying there's no business case, while the rest of the world is taking advantage of the fact that we were playing international Boy Scouts and Girl Guides. The practical effect, additional 28 cents on the liter of gasoline and diesel. Now, because all commodities are priced in U.S. terms, imagine having that kind of a burden on everything you buy. Food, transportation costs, lumber costs, cement costs, steel costs, asphalt for the road. All of these things mean that because we no longer have the petrodollar status we did, not only are you paying a carbon tax of 23, 24 cents a liter in Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and of course, let's not forget British Columbia, you now have to pay an additional, let's call it for what it is, an additional 28 cents to 30 cents a liter, depending on the HST or GST that you're using, because the Canadian dollar no longer behaves the way it did, because we're not selling oil and gas to the extent that we could or should. Bottom line, woke green policies are costing most people in Canada who vote Liberal far more than they can afford. And it's only a matter of time before they start chewing those smartening up pills.
Well, that is precisely it. I don't know if you stay in touch with any of your any of the current sitting members of Parliament, but do you have a sense that there is almost a caucus revolt impending on Justin Trudeau, because he is clearly putting a lot of political lives in danger with his bad policies and his bad planning? Do you think he's facing some kind of revolt from his own caucus?
No, most are very effete. They were there because of him. They're not very well qualified. In other words, they got in. Their condition for coming in was being, ring kissers, if you will. They're not known to be very strong. They don't have an identity beyond being members of Parliament, and their clinginess to Trudeau is the only reason. Trudeau, unlike his father, because I worked for his father, you may not have agreed with him, but at least the man, you had to stand up and debate him. And if you didn't debate him, fine, that was one thing. Expect that he would treat you with significant contempt. If you debated him, you had a strong position, you had a moral position, you had a conscientious decision, you had something that's well articulated, well explained, and well reasoned, he would back off and he would allow you to do what you had to do, but you had to prove it to him. This guy can't handle it. He surrounded himself with yes men and women who basically go along with his garbage and his drool and his drivel. And the reality is that for many people, this is a group of people that will go down with the ship, and rightly so. Perhaps the Liberal Party will renew itself at some point. I doubt it. But it's pretty clear the public is short of, myopia from people and voters here in Toronto and a few in downtown Montreal and Vancouver. The rest of the country gets it. It is time for these people to go. And frankly, if members of Parliament don't understand that, I can say there's 50 who should be dusting off their resumes, because we're going to need it post 2025 or whenever Jagmeet Singh, buys a spine and realizes what a goof and what a poltroon he looks like. He's just no other way of expressing it than the guy looks like he's been had. And for him to walk around strutting his stuff, pretending, I see him attacking the Royal Bank. I'm not a big fan of the banks either. Well, he and his wife have a nice little mortgage on rentals, and own another home and a rental property, and the HELOC and everything else is our Royal Bank backed. It's kind of a little disingenuous to be biting the damn hand that feeds you.
Well, certainly, there is such an air of authoritarianism around Trudeau and this government. It's not just what they're doing to consumers through this carbon tax and through their energy policies, but they are so enthused about censorship. I have never seen a government more in the Western world more enthused about shutting down free speech, and it's something I'm certainly fighting as a journalist. So I know you're the head of a nonpartisan organization. You're not fighting for any political figures, but you are not going to be supporting the re-election of Justin Trudeau.
No, and look, in fairness, Aaron O'Toole is a good friend of mine. His father and I were federal and provincial counterparts in my old riding, in Ontario riding, Pickering, Scarborough East, 3 ridings that changed over time in names as the riding got bigger. But I went after Aaron as well for falling into this trap of weather taxes and believing that the world was coming to an end. And that's not what he was saying, but to somehow put water with his wine, I thought it was the most ridiculous idea. No, I'm not partisan. I've never been, the only member of any party has been the Liberal Party. I've never joined another party. I have no interest in joining parties. But if a party is prepared to commit itself realistically to policies that make sense, and what I'm hearing from Pierre Poilievre sounds a whole lot more like where I was as a member of parliament in the Liberal Party 20 years ago, then you can understand why folks of my generation, and we're not that old, are gravitating towards that and realize that pragmatism has an important role to play in our politics, and an even more important role to play when you keep your eye off the game. And the game here is to help Canadians make ends meet, not find trendy, cute, arduous ways to make it tough for them to make ends meet while claiming that you somehow have some virtue over the climate. There is no one out there who's going to be able to change the climate by simply putting a tax on people. And I think the tax on people is an attack on their livelihood and the standard of living, and it is unfortunately an attack on the unity of the country as a consequence. Everything that they have done reminds me of what his father, Justin Trudeau's father, said. This is a little bit like the sorcerer's apprentice opening the damn Pandora's box and now can't shut the thing. And for that reason, he has to go. And anybody who doesn't want to do that, I say to them, look, I'm not here because I don't like Justin Trudeau. I said good things about him at the outset. I did know him a little bit. I was concerned about his, being green, and there were things that I thought were going to be problematic. And I was a Liberal riding president of the riding association I represented for many, many years. But this is not what I would have expected of the Liberal Party. And if you ask the question, were my generation of Liberals? Well, most of them, I was one of the younger ones. I'm in my 60s. The average age when I was elected and I was 30 which is 30 years ago. The average age was about 55. You can imagine many of them are not involved anymore, and many of them have passed on. For many of us, though, who've seen a pragmatic Liberal Party embrace what it did, looking at necessity, tackling the issue before us, which was unfortunately unity and at the same time economic collapse. We did well on both fronts because we knew what the real issues were. And I think Canadians are becoming more connected with reality, and that this government is completely and utterly detached from it. The federal Trudeau Liberals are so far away from reality, it would take the Hubble telescope to see where the hell they are.
That's good. We're going to use that one. That's good. Well, that's probably a good note to end it on, because it's refreshing to hear a common sense Liberal like yourself talking about this situation honestly and forthrightly. You've identified all of the key information. Nobody knows this sector better than you do, and thank God for the work you're doing, and that you're out there.
Yeah,
trying to
point out to people this old little thing. You can't even find online anymore. Nobody can read that. This is a report on gasoline pricing in Canada, June of 1998. Liberals did care about fuel prices. They did care about helping people. and it allowed me to do other things. Background on the impact of mergers in the grocery industry, several bills that went with it. Look, I'm not showing these because they happen to be in front of me. It's just that there was a time when the party actually truly cared, and its membership cared. They've lost their way. And as a result, I think it's time for voters to tell them to get lost.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dan McTeague, for joining me today, and keep up the good work. Stay in touch, and let's do this again.
We'll do it again. We need good journalists like you, David. Thanks for doing this.
All right. Thank you so much, David. Hi, it's David Krayden here. Thank you so much for subscribing and supporting the station. We could not move forward without you. What we're trying to do every week here is bring you the news you might not see everywhere else. And we're coming against Justin Trudeau's internet censorship laws. Please subscribe, ring that bell if you haven't done so already. I know it's annoying to ask. Believe me, I'm not a salesman. I'm a writer. But I really implore you to do that because I need this station to keep going. We want to keep bringing you the news that you want to hear. And if you want a story covered, let me know, please. Because that's where I'm getting a lot of news information from your tips. So thank you for being there for me. And you can also support this station by going on my Substack and subscribing for $8 a month. Yes, I know it's free, but I can also use your support. So please do that if you can. And I'll continue to be here every week, every day if must needs be, to tell you what's really happening in this world of ours. And I'm in nobody's pocket, but I am on your side.